So thank you both for joining us. And this morning I'd really like to see if we could have a provocative session. And the idea here is to stimulate some debate. We've had a lot of great talks. We've had a lot of discussions about how to execute some ideas about innovation, how we're starting to see some uptake on some of the things that we've been talking about now for, goodness, a good 10 years now. Where I'd like to take this panel today with your help is to bring some of the practicality, where the rubber hits the road of execution, how we're working internally to create this change, talk a little bit about some practical tips about how we can drive engagement, and we talk about that a lot. And at the end of the day, how can we drive and measure impact versus efficiencies and tracking? And I think we've all been very good in the digital space about tracking what's happening, but translating that into impact and things that we can learn from it has been a challenge so far, which I think we're getting better at, but obviously the need continues to be able to get the type of funding and investment that really it deserves if you take a look at where our customer base is right now and how they utilize the technology. So with that said, we hear a lot about doing things differently. How many, just by show of hands, have had an upper management personnel member, if you will, knock on your door or in a meeting say, we need to do things differently? Anyone? Just about every. If you haven't, I'm just really surprised. There might be, might have a rotator cuff tear or something. But, I think we've all heard this, but I want to bring it to sort of the practical nature of this. Christine and Debrianna, what does this practically mean to you when you hear we need to do something different, knowing the marketplace and how it's changed right now, and the internal realities about how we can execute?
I mean, I can represent. Can you guys hear me? Yeah? Okay. I can represent the product management side of you. That, I mean, yeah, your boss gives you a ring and says, hey, Christine, let's do something different. So then I call you two and I say, hey, I got to do something different. No, I'm only kidding. But, I mean, if the different thing is the right thing to do, we talk about this all the time. I fall back on my analytics. Where are my people, whether it's doctors or patients, and sometimes pharmacists or other allied health? What are they doing to find information? What are the channels? What are they looking for? What are the messages? What's the content? And that's what guides me. I mean, we always have these wonderful provocative things that come down from on high on the tablets, and we have to say, oh, let's go do that. But if it's not the right thing to do, or your constituents, your target audience isn't there, I don't think you rashly, quickly go and do that. So I'm a person that typically falls back on, what do I know? What are my analytics? So I don't know.
Yep. And I would say that one of the things that we've seen that has been challenging is that oftentimes the directive to do things differently comes down, but there really isn't an appetite for testing and learning. You're not given the license to actually do things differently in a way that actually can provide learnings. And I think it's important to know is that if the company's culture doesn't allow for that, it's like asking someone to have an ROI on something that's never been tested before. And I think it's important for us to remember that if our marketing budgets don't change, or the media mix doesn't change, or the way we go to market doesn't change, that we can't just tactically do things differently when nothing else is different about how we're promoting our brands. Right.
I think we could all agree, though, that we need to drive more engagement, and we're using this term quite a lot now. You may have heard it inside your organizations. What does engagement really mean? Practically to your organizations right now? How are we talking about engagement, demonstrating it, and maybe even more importantly, how are we measuring it right now?
Go first.
From the product management side, from the the drug manufacturer side, I can be very transparent and say I don't think we're there yet. I mean, I think Debrianna's got a ton of experience where we're trying to get there with certain other clients, but I don't think we're anywhere near there. So I think we're going to have to take baby steps to get there. But I mean, engagement is key critical, but I think all the things we've done historically with reach, frequency, levels of impressions, getting your message out there, I think all of that is leading us up to engagement, but I don't think we're anywhere near there at this point.
I have two thoughts on that question, and one is, right now I think you've got some very direct response metrics that come traditionally from the digital landscape of measuring clicks or key page views or coupon downloads, and some of that is being used as a proxy for engagement. But in general, consumer DTC marketing gets a 0.2% click-through rate, so the other 99.8% of your ads do need to be measured. And some people look at GRPs or impressions as a proxy, but I think there needs to be a lot of movement in the marketplace to determine how does that part of my marketing spend actually mean this person is engaged. If it's a complicated disease state with a lot of information that can be put into a creative unit and educate someone, then how do we measure education as opposed to perhaps clicks and page views and downloads? The other point I would add is don't forget that engagement is understanding what your consumers are thinking and saying about you. Right now, most of our clients are saying engagement is these page views or this number of downloads, but listening to your consumers, and I know, Christine, you've begun doing this, and hearing what they have to say and mining that information for insights. One example is we have a biologic, and through the monitoring of the social space, we discovered that it was the injection that was the biggest problem with the drug, and we needed to create advocates of people who had gotten past the hump and that they can talk to others, and it's an opportunity to create a messaging strategy. So what is the ROI on that? Well, maybe the ROI is instead of spending money on market research and focus groups, we got a key learning that could be factored into our future marketing efforts.
Or, and I'll just jump in, Tony, or it's in, the ROI is invisible. The gentleman who just spoke before us from Serrano talks about the tipping point. I mean, there's ROI embedded in what Debrianna talked about. I mean, if you're taking a listen to what's happening viscerally with patients in your disease category on wherever they are, in whatever digital communities, you're probably picking up some real true insights, right? And then layering that into what you do, how you do it, and when you do it, it's definitely, in my mind, it's going to pay you back.
Right.
It's just you're not going to have that, I gave you, $1 and you
Yeah.
paid me back 6 to 1 in 6 months. You're not going to see that historical ROI.
Right. So let's say that we agree that engagement's important. Let's say that we've even come up with a way to think about it a little bit. Debrianna, from your experience, knowing that engagement's so critical for execution and impact right now, how would, if somebody would come to you and say, I'd like to buy an engagement plan. I don't want to buy a reach plan.
Right.
Don't want to buy a GRP or a TRP. I want to buy an engagement plan. How would you go about that? Right?
I think that's a great question, and obviously there's no silver bullet for every disease state, but I think some of the considerations from a planning perspective that we would put into place is, first of all, knowing, what's the disease state, what's the competition, how many are in the marketplace, those types of questions. And if we're trying to educate people to go to the doctor and get a specific, bone density test, we might have a different approach than, for example, someone who's been living with depression for years. So there's so much content, especially on the digital space, that deals with the different life stages of a person with the disease. And they also don't only deal with the disease state itself, but lifestyle things like diet, exercise, fitness, comorbidities. So I think that an engagement model should be tied to the content that's surrounding it. So you're not just creating an ad to live and be divorced from the content, but to really think about how the content and the ad message can work together to create a better branding experience, which is something that really cannot be done in a lot of media vehicles like TV and print. And yet they say those media often gets the lion's share. So I think there's still room to think about creating more relevancy, and relevancy is the first step into engagement.